Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new episode of Micadelic. I'm Mike Brancatelli. Thanks for being here. Thanks for checking out the show. Got a great one today. I learned so much in this conversation with my guest, Eugene Trufkin. He wrote a book called The Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide. All the show notes, the links and stuff will be in the show notes. And he's also the author of a fat loss book called The Laws of Aesthetics, Definitive Blueprint for Rapid Fat Loss for Living a Healthy Lifestyle. But we're really focused on his book, The Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide, where he kind of breaks it down and shows people how to navigate the toxic, poisoned, diseased space of food in our modern world, at least in America. So we'll get into all of it. It's pretty heavy, I guess. I mean, it's just, there's a lot, you think, well, food, you should just be able to grow your vegetables and pick them and eat them, right? And that's, I think, sort of the way that a lot of us would want to live, knowing that we're getting something that's just pure and natural and healthy in the way that human beings are supposed to eat. But, there's so many things that are going on in our factory farm food system. So Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide is the book. And it's a great conversation. Like I said, I learned a ton, and I hope you guys do too. So what else? That's pretty much it. And if you're in Denver, come out to Archipelago on December 20th. I'm going to be, it's part of Good Cinema's Secret Cinema Society. They're doing a documentary film called Surviving Progress. And so we're going to watch that and talk about the myth of progress, a very kind of civilized to death centric talk. So I'm pretty excited to jam on that topic, as it's been a passion of mine for quite some time. So if you're in Denver, come out on Friday the 20th to Archipelago. I don't know what the time is. I forgot off the top of my head, but check my social media, Facebook and whatnot. Instagram, Micadelic_podcast. And you guys know what to do if you like the show. Check out the sponsor, Hemp Bombs, if you're interested in CBD stuff. Put in the code Mike15. You get 15% off CBD products. They ship everywhere in the country. And yeah, thanks for all the love and support. Appreciate it. Thanks to all the Patreon people. I dropped a bonus Patreon solo cast for all you patrons out there. All the producers of this show, let me know what you think. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it too long? I love feedback like that. I love hearing from people. Send me an email. Hey, really like the podcast, but can you turn down the intro music or make your intro shorter, right? Sometimes I hear that. So this one's going to be pretty short. But anyway, just get in touch with me. I always respond. Like to hear from you guys. If you enjoy this podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating and review. Helps the show tremendously. And like I mentioned, Patreon, you can become a Patreon member for just $1 a month. So you can show your love and support for this show for $1 a month. And, 'tis the season to be giving. So if you do feel inclined, that would be very nice. I would really appreciate that. You can go to patreon.com/MikeBrank, BRANC. And you get access to the bonus stuff and to the Inner Sanctum WhatsApp chat group where people are just continuing the conversation offline all day, 24/7, all around the world. So that's really cool. And then my website's mikebrank.com, so you can go there. I also have one-time PayPal donations if you just feel like doing a one-time thing and you want to get involved in the monthly stuff. But that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoy this episode. Thanks. Bye. So what Eugene, what got you started on this mission to help bring information to people about factory farming and searching for organic foods and things like that? What got you started on this journey? Was it always something that you cared about, or was it something that you discovered later on in life? Or
Well, first, thanks for having me on your show. And I guess to give you like a little bit of background of how I got involved in this kind of niche topic, which is, I feel like one of the pillars of health, sourcing high quality food. Basically, I was born and raised on like an off-grid biodynamic farm in Ukraine. And so for the listeners that don't know what that is, it's basically, it's typically what a person has a mental image of when they think of farming. They think of like a small family and they have like a wide variety of animals, a wide variety of crops, kind of living on this small self-sustaining farm. So it's kind of like what most people have a mental image of when they think of farming to begin with. So I kind of grew up in that environment. And then when I came to the US and I went to the supermarket for the first time, I thought like basically the US mastered biodynamic farming because like visually you can't really tell the difference between kind of like organic or factory farm food or biodynamically produced food for the most part, like visually. So for years and years, I kind of like shopped at places like Costco, and I thought like, man, the US has pretty much mastered biodynamic, like super organic farming. I mean, look how much food they can produce organically. They're selling like 2,000 eggs for like $1.50. Like they've mastered it. This is why like America is such a huge powerhouse. And then for years and years, I kind of shopped and bought that food and didn't even think twice about it, honestly. And maybe like 3 to 4 years ago, I ran into a video on YouTube called The Dirt Facts. And it was kind of presented by Paul Chek. And he's like a holistic expert that's really big into biodynamic farming and kind of trying to encourage people to navigate away from factory farm food. And after watching that video, it kind of opened up my eyes towards that. Man, the food that I'm buying at like places like Costco, for instance, isn't the type of food that I was raised on that off-grid biodynamic farm in Ukraine. And the production practices are way different. And that's kind of, for the most part, after that video, where all the confusion began. So for the most part, most people don't care about sourcing high quality food. But for the people that do care, it's still like extremely confusing and still extremely hard to find high quality food that has like a great nutritional profile. So for example, let's just kind of presume like, let's say you went to a diet, like a registered dietitian, and in kind of like the program they have written out for you, that registered dietitian told you to, start including grass-fed beef in your diet, for example, as one of many variables that you need to kind of include to optimize your health.
Sounds like a good suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah. So 99% of people will take this information. Okay, I need to eat grass-fed beef, and go to the supermarket. And basically, they'll see grass-fed on some of the labels. Sometimes they'll see grass-fed, grass-finished. Sometimes they can see 100% grass-fed, sometimes pasture-raised, sometimes organic. Right. And they'll see this grass-fed label and they'll buy that meat, not even questioning for a second what that label means. In their mind's eye, they automatically presume like the cattle, for instance, are raised 100% on pasture. They're living their natural life when they see that label, et cetera, et cetera. And that little increase in price kind of helps reinforce that mental image as well, which kind of adds a little bit to the deception. But what a lot of people don't know is that, for instance, all cattle are grass-fed. There's no way you can feed grain to cattle their entire life and keep them alive. So, for instance, in like a harvesting cycle, let's say there's like a 2-year harvesting cycle from start to finish. The bulk majority of the time, the cattle would spend, it depends from operation to operation, obviously, but the bulk majority of the time, the cattle would spend on pasture eating nothing but grass. All cattle, no matter whether they're factory farmed or not. But the bulk majority of them are sent to a feedlot like a few months before they're harvested and kind of killed and processed, and fed nothing but grains for the most part. And that short amount of time changes the nutritional profile of the meat quite a bit. But so when you see the phrase grass-fed, they're not lying to you. It is grass-fed, but it's grain finished. Right. And if you didn't know how to look past that deception, you wouldn't be able to see that. And then sometimes when I'm giving grocery store tours, the person would say, oh, but my meat says it's grass-fed and grass-finished. Another typical practice that happens with that phrase is, for instance, they will be raised on pasture, the bulk majority, let's say like 10 months. then fed grain for a few months, then finished on grass for like a week or two, and it could still be considered grass-fed and grass-finished. They're not lying to you. It is grass-fed and grass-finished.
Oh, man.
But there's a lot of grain that's substituted into their diet as well. And the problem with that is grain is not part of like the species-specific diet of a cattle. Like cattle are herbivores. They, for instance, like eat grass for the most part. And that's what helps optimize their nutritional profile. And in particular, that's what helps balance out the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. And for a lot of people, for listeners that don't know, like omega-3, for example, does a lot in your body, but one of the most important things is kind of like an anti-inflammatory micronutrient. And omega-6 is a pro-inflammatory micronutrient. A lot of times with these grain-fed animals that aren't fed a species-specific diet, so in this case, aren't fed nothing but grass or forage, for example, but supplemented heavily with grain, in particular genetically modified corn and soy, it's going to shoot the omega-6 way up, causing like a lot of inflammation in the person's body that eats this food group.
Right.
And ruin the natural balance between the omega-3 and omega-6 micronutrients. So a lot of times people will buy this meat because they'll see grass-fed or they'll see grass-fed and grass-finished and not realize that it could be a legit operation, but there's a good chance that it's actually supplemented heavily with grain.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, geez, these swindling bastards, they figure out a way, they figure out a way to do it. And man, what a trick, it's just like, that's what we see happening so much. And it's so hard because it's like, man, we just want to get good, clean food that's going to be good for us. And obviously like the animals that are taken care of and aren't like treated in this terrible way. I just want to back up a little bit also too, because you brought up biodynamic farming and, kind of mentioning like how it's what you would imagine, like kind of a local mom and pop farm, small thing there. What else differentiates biodynamic farming from, I don't know, I guess say like organic farming or just farming, what else does it encompass?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And honestly, I could expand on that question quite a bit. But in short, biodynamic farming is a farming system that includes animals, plants, and soil in one preferably self-sustaining ecosystem, where even organic farming these days is just basically like a monocropping operation. So for instance, this person grows carrots for acre and acre and acre and acre. This person grows just chicken. This person grows just cabbage. And the problem with that system is, first of all, it requires a tremendous amount of inputs because there's no self-sustaining going on there. So obviously, a lot of land has to be used for crop cultivation, et cetera, to be able to actually provide the resources necessary to make those operations happen. Another issue with that is if you're growing kind of like if you have like a monocrop operation, you're growing nothing but carrot after carrot, acre after acre, year after year, is it depletes the mineral content of the soil. So for instance, there are a certain amount of minerals that are required to produce a vegetable or produce a carrot. And if you're planting nothing but carrots, the soil will become deficient in those nutrients. And then once they become deficient in those nutrients, basically the soil is weak, and weak soil cannot produce healthy crops. And when weak soil can't produce healthy crops, what you get is a lot of weak crops, obviously. And nature's way of getting rid of weak crops is pests. Pests come around and just eat weak crops. They don't eat strong, healthy crops.
Oh, I see.
And when pests come around, you have to use what? A lot of pesticides.
Yeah, wow.
And then what do those pesticides do? They kill the soil even more. So the next annual cycle, you have to use even more pesticides, which kill the soil more, deplete the nutrient profile of the soil, which give rise to weaker plants, which give rise to more pests, and the cycle continues. And then obviously going back to our discussion with the beef, for example, like a lot of the farmland used, like for example, like there are all these Amazon fires that's been kind of popular in the news lately. And a lot of people are thinking like these fires are for cattle operations. In truth, they're actually to harvest corn and like a lot of grains, corn and soy for factory farmed operations, but in particular for ethanol production. But in relation to what we're talking about here in terms of for factory farmed operations, if they're growing weak plants that are sprayed with a lot of herbicides, fungicides, whatever, a myriad of other chemicals, that's going to be making it into the nutritional profile of the meat because kind of you are what your food eats and is exposed to. So obviously, if that cattle is eating nutritionally inferior food that's also laced with a myriad of very dangerous chemicals, that's going to be making it in the nutritional profile of the meat, fat, and organ content of that animal in particular as well. So not only are you getting meat that's not fed a species-specific diet, which once again shoots the omega-6 way up, which is a pro-inflammatory, which causes a lot of inflammation in your body. And if a person looks up inflammation theory of disease, they'll quickly see that 90+% of disease just arises from low-grade chronic inflammation.
I know Dr. Andrew Weil is a huge proponent of reducing inflammation, and he's written books about it and has I think a restaurant called True Food Kitchen that provides anti-inflammatory foods and stuff. So important. And this biodynamic kind of reminds me of permaculture, right?
Yep. Well, honestly, I don't know too much about permaculture. I've read about it here and there, but I'm not too much of an expert to talk about those practices, to be honest.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same kind of principle. It's just centered on whole systems thinking, rather than the kind of monocropping thing. Just the way that a natural ecosystem would be. And I think that sort of what you were saying is coming from Ukraine to the United States and being like, oh my God, look at this, they've done it, and we haven't. We've just kind of factory farmed. We've mass produced, and I think that's sort of the core of the problem, right? Is this massive, just get as much as we possibly can out. Who cares what the nutritional content is? Just keep mass producing this stuff. Massive supermarkets, monocrop farms, subsidized agriculture, the pesticides, Monsanto, the whole thing, right? I mean, that's sort of what's at the core of the problem, rather than these kind of smaller biodynamic farms and permaculture activities, which is more in alignment with the true expression of nature and the true expression of how life wants to exist.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the biggest arguments is oh, I don't buy that food because it's a little bit more expensive. So first of all, I'm going to break this topic up into two different topics.
Oh, cool.
So one thing is I did a experiment where I went to a local kind of high-end supermarket that sold a lot of organic produce, but also sold a lot of factory farm food as well, called Sprouts in my area. And then I standardized it. Yeah, so I standardized a 2,000 calorie diet. So the same amount of protein, carbs, and fat in each diet, and both 2,000 calories. And I compared basically the price of factory farmed food to supermarket level organic. And for a 2,000 calorie diet, it ended up being $7.77 for factory farmed diet of 2,000 calories, and basically $12.20. I forget the exact amount, but it was in the $12 mark for supermarket level organic. So basically it's a $5 difference, which isn't that dramatic. You can have the average person just needs, I would say, about 12,000 calories, maybe even less, since the average person these days isn't very active in their life. So to shop all organic, all you really need is about $12 a day. I mean, one McDonald's meal is $10, maybe even more if you get the full meal. So the price difference isn't that much. And in my opinion, people that shop a factory farm diet also typically, from my observation, eat out a lot more. So actually, in total, they're spending a lot more on their food.
Right. Yeah. And then maybe also factoring into the, it's hard to do because it seems maybe a little abstract for the average person, but and I mean, even for me too, right? It's factoring in the account of what's going to really nourish you and provide you with the nutrients and sustenance that you need and want, and what is going to maybe eventually lead to sickness, which then costs more money. And then you have to get, the treatments and things like that. So yeah, in the long run, it definitely costs you more. Costs you in the short term and the long term, right? To buy factory farm.
Yeah, I like to focus on the short term because people aren't too focused about how sick they're going to be like 20 years from now. So I
Right.
feel
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
for the bulk majority of people that haven't felt like a lot of physical pain in their life, they're going to have trouble kind of really seeing the value in that. So I just focus on the day-to-day dollar value because you can have more of a appreciation and understanding of that loss.
So much more impactful, I think, that to do that, because it's direct, it's immediate, it's right in front of us. I think one of the things that I've struggled with too, and I feel like maybe a lot of people out there, is that we find out about this stuff, we see the documentaries, I've watched all of them, and the Food Matters and Earthlings, and all these documentaries that come out. I feel like the culture that we live in right now, there's a new one on Netflix now called like The Game Changers. There's
Mm-hmm.
Fed Up. Like there's always a new thing that's like talking about food and the food system. And like I'll watch it, and then and people will watch it, and they'll be like, "Oh man, like this is so fucked up. This is wrong. Like what are we gonna do?" But then eventually you're just kind of like, "Oh, whatever." I don't know,
Yeah.
so it's because I don't know, like it seems like such a massive problem, and it seems like so omnipresent, like everywhere we go, restaurants that we go, supermarkets where we go. So like how, yeah, I mean, you just mentioned how to make it a little bit easier for people. What are some other ways that can kind of bring this massive like crisis, I guess we can call it, of factory farming, and how to kind of switch practically to different ways? And you mentioned you do like food tours, and you have your book. And so what are some ways that people can kind of take action like today to try and, do some things that aren't going to be like so overwhelming, or that they could kind of maybe stay focused and consistent on? And maybe also too, a part of that question is why, like why, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about it too, about how it can make you sick, and you are what your animals eat, and that, and those sort of things. But yeah, just maybe a couple things around that.
Yeah, let's cover that as well. But really quick, to finish off the argument in terms of the price, really quick.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I think it's important for people to know this as well. Although once again, I think like the large bulk majority of people won't really care, as you've mentioned. But for the small percentage of people that do care, I just want them to know that whenever you do go to a supermarket these days, even Whole Foods, I mean, you see like a tremendous amount of variety in food there. But the problem with the kind of like agricultural system in America in general, and I think the Western world in general overall, is that basically there's a lot of consolidation in the food industry. So basically, you go to a supermarket and you see like a lot of items, but really all of the items are give and take produced by 10 different companies.
Mm.
And I'm not for kind of limiting the success of companies, but what I have a problem with that system is you basically have 10 people or 10 like executive staff telling the whole entire country pretty much, because like 99% of people are going to go to the supermarket, what they should be eating or what they have access to eat. And basically how farming works in the Western world in general is through a vertically integrated system. And I'll kind of explain why the cost is so little on face value on factory farm food versus like organic, for instance. Not so little, but just a little bit less than organically produced food.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, they work on a vertically integrated system. So, for example, let's say you're a chicken farmer and you're raising chicken for meat, and I'm like Tyson Foods, a huge corporation that was basically at one point the biggest meat producer in the
Mm-hmm.
U.S. And actually, the factory farm system was invented by two American guys, John and Don Tyson, back in about 1955 or 1960. I forget the exact date, but they also opened Tyson Foods, which is kind of like a huge, huge company. I think they own like, I don't know, like 30 or 40% of all chicken produced in the
Right.
US, just that one company. So what happens is I come to you and I'm like, okay, so I have all the trucks. I have the millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of slaughter facilities. I have the veterinarians. I have the patents on the genetically produced grains. I have also the hatcheries as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to your door once a month, and I'm going to give you 100,000 chickens, and I'm going to need you to raise them to my standards, and then I'll kind of buy them back from you basically at the end of the 4-week growing cycle, because typically it takes about 4 weeks to grow a chicken to full size, like ready for slaughter, 4 to 6 weeks in a factory farm system. And this is, and then I'll pay you for raising them to my standards. But you have to kind of If I tell you you have to grow them indoors, you have to grow them indoors. If I tell you have to feed them not a species-specific diet, so in this case, the chickens are omnivores, but you're going to be feeding them nothing but grain, so they're vegetarian fed, which is another label we can kind of touch on that you don't want to see on your food either. And you have to give them these drugs, etc. if I want you to give them these drugs. And basically, you'll just get a paycheck. And this is kind of like enticing for the farmer because it takes away a lot of the responsibility that the farmer has to deal with. Now they don't have to deal with the marketing. They don't have to deal with the logistics involved. They don't have to set up contracts with all these supermarkets, et cetera, et cetera. They have like a whole network they can come into, and they kind of agree to that. But once they agree, Tyson Foods would be like, I'll tell you, oh, but your facility is way too small to house 100,000 chickens. So you're going to need to take on like a $400,000, $500,000 loan and build a much bigger facility. But don't worry about it. I know you're only making about $50,000 to $30,000 a year. That's not even a problem because I already have a contract with the bank. And basically, if I send you to that bank, they'll give you that loan. And there's a farmer relief program set up by the government. I forgot the name of it, but basically, if the farmer goes out of business, the taxpayer will bail out that loan for the bank. So basically, the farmer will take on that $500,000 loan. The bank will collect interest while the farmer is in business. And then if the farmer goes out of business, the bank doesn't care because it'll sell the farmer's land. The farmer will lose everything, and the remaining money that they need, they're just going to get the taxpayer to pay for it.
Oh,
so,
man.
and Tyson Foods doesn't care either because it's not their
Right.
loss. This farmer is just a contractor to them, so it doesn't matter. They'll just find like another person, or maybe buy out their farm and then just hire someone to manage it, which is how this consolidation happened to begin with. This is kind of how they run these small farmers out of business. And there's a lot of trickery that goes into this vertically integrated system too that kind of is off topic from what we're discussing today, but it's like very manipulative, and it really puts these farmers at a tough spot because now you have all this debt, you're barely making any money, and you have to do what these guys tell you to do because there's only like one or two other companies you can go work for if it fails to make up this debt. And most of the time, if you do fail, they kind of blacklist you from the industry in general. So you're not going to be able to find work anywhere else.
Oh my God. It's such a tragedy. Like it's just, big business and big government coming together do a lot of terrible things. And, it reminds me of sort of the economic hitman protocol. I had this guy, John Perkins, on the show, who was basically a government contractor, would go to, countries and do the same thing. And it reminds me of like the student loan system as well, too. I mean, when the deal sounds so sweet, it's like, to the farmers, and then on the opposite side of things, the government and the corporations are in business together, so they can't. It's like a no lose situation, for them. It's crazy.
Yeah, and another thing is like all these factory farm systems just rely on grains, like we talked about previously, and feed for the animals, for instance, in an animal operation, composes like 80% of the total cost of the operation. So it's a huge bulk of the total expenses involved in that operation. And once again, grains, that corn and soy, genetically modified corn and soy, that's another subsidized industry by the taxpayer. Right. So it's like when you go to the store and you see that beef for like, I don't know, $2 a pound for like ground beef, it's more like $4.50 or $5 when you take into consideration the amount of tax money that goes into supporting that system. And then in that case, if it's $4 to $5, dude, just pay an extra dollar and you'll get organic beef.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like obviously organic, like legit pasture raised beef doesn't rely on grains. So they're not going to be able to get that subsidy kickback, and they don't rely on these huge warehouse facilities because they let their animals roam free instead of kind of constricting them to these Nazi concentration camp-like facilities. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a system, like the current government subsidy system, I think, in my opinion, just kind of put there just to benefit the large factory farms and to kind of disadvantage the small the small guy that's actually doing the right thing and has good husbandry practices and high levels of integrity in their food practice.
Yeah, I can't help but go conspiratorial when thinking about this stuff. It's like, hey, let's subsidize the agriculture, tell them to do it one way, give them all this shitty food, then it gets them sick, then they gotta pay to get prescription meds, and then everyone's making money, and the elites are winning, and everyone else is suffering. I mean, maybe it's a little bit more complex than that. Maybe it's not as focused and arranged as that, but that's sure as hell what it seems like, right?
Yeah, I mean the whole vertically integrated. There's a book called The Meat Racket. I forgot the author's name, but it's like one of my favorite books, and it has very little to do about farming, although the farming is the background theme. It's basically a book about the rise of factory farming and how John and Don Tyson kind of like created this vertically integrated system and implemented it into poultry, and then eventually they took over the pork and the beef industry for a long time. And at one point, they're like the biggest meat producer in the entire world. But basically, it goes into like all of the trickery. And I mean, the book was so interesting. It's more like read like a thriller because you can't wait to flip the page because you're like, man, what kind of scheming ass shit are these guys going to try to do next?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right here. It says The Meat Racket, The Secret Takeover of America's Food Business by Christopher Leonard. The biggest takeover in American business that you've never heard of. Yeah, it's like so many people just aren't even aware. And so many people they're not aware, and they don't know, and they need to feed their families, and they just go and they just buy whatever they can. And it's like, man, once you get looped into this, it's hard to break out. Not just for the people, but also for the farmers and for the fucking animals too. Jesus, like you mentioned these Nazi concentration camps. I mean, what horrible, horrible way to treat a living being in these slaughterhouse, factories. Crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And then to kind of also touch on more issues with government regulation and oversight. Basically, like I mentioned, like all these factory farmed operations rely heavily on grains. And even if you like during grocery store tours, like sometimes like I give grocery store tours to people that are interested in losing weight and kind of learning more about how nutrition impacts their health. And sometimes a lot of times, for the most part, people know there are like chemicals on their like produce, for example.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that.
But
yeah, it was like we were talking about meat, but also this is for everything, right?
Yeah, so they know, they're like, okay, I know there are like chemicals used in the production of a lot of this food, but there are basically like three myths that kind of people believe that help them justify the purchase of this food and continued purchase of this food. So there's a great book, and basically I'm getting a lot of this information from The Myth of Safe Pesticides by Andre Liu, which is another like really, really good book. And I had a chance to interview him extensively for the research in my book, and he helped me a lot as well.
Yeah, your book is Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide. That's
Yep, exactly. And there are basically like three myths, and this applies to vegetarians as well. So we've been talking a lot about meat, but this totally applies to everyone, because how crops are raised, how the soil is managed is going to affect how the animal is raised, the nutritional profile of the animal, and the nutritional profile of the crops as well, because it always goes back to the health of the soil. So basically, there are three myths. The first myth is, like I hear very often, is basically people are like, oh, the government has my back, and they do extensive testing for pesticides before they're allowed into the market. Where in truth, there is no safe testing for pesticides. I know that's shocking. I know that's shocking to believe, but basically how the testing procedure works is, in short, there are two ingredients in any chemical pesticide formulation. So first of all, there's an active ingredient, but then there are also many inactive ingredients that help increase the lifespan of the active ingredient and the potency as well. So for safety standards, the only thing that's required by these chemical companies is for them to test the active ingredient in isolation on its own without the presence of all those inactive ingredients, which increase the potency and lifespan of that active ingredient. So the entire common sense would say, I get the whole entire finished product, and then I test it for safety. But this never happens. They never test the complete formulation for safety. They test just the active ingredient in isolation on its own, which has like a myriad of problems. First of all, in any crop production cycle, there's like a myriad of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, fungicides used in just one production cycle. There could be up to 10 different drugs sitting there, 10 different chemicals rather, sitting in an operation that they cycle through. So obviously everyone would agree with me that taking like 10 different pharmaceuticals at once is probably not a good idea versus taking one pharmaceutical that maybe has been tested for safety to work in isolation on its own. You hear of a lot of people always dying from taking a myriad of drugs altogether, and no one really knows how this cocktail of drugs is going to interact with the individual's biochemistry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So it's important to remember that all these drugs aren't actually tested. The complete formulation is never tested for safety. And another thing I get, they'll be like, okay, so it's not tested for safety, but I'll just wash my produce and I'm going to wash it off. But in reality, most pesticides, the bulk majority of them these days are systemic pesticides. They work by basically the root of the plant soaking up the chemicals into the actual nutritional profile of the plant. So the bulk of the chemical residue is actually inside the nutritional profile of the actual crop. It's not on the surface. Just because you're taking off the skin or you're washing the surface just cleans off like a very, very small very, very small portion of the amount of chemicals in that produce. So that's another problem.
You're scaring me, man. I'm like, what are we going to do? Oh no, we're fucked. This is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you know what, when I read that book for the first time, I thought for sure this guy was exaggerating, although he had many credible peer-reviewed studies in his book. But after looking into it myself for like a month or two, including like actually the FDA headquarters is basically right across the street from my house, and I interviewed someone from there. That basically is how it works. They never test like the complete formulation for safety.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah. I mean, I think this happens in all areas of life, and especially like when, I mean, we always want to isolate something and look at it in like a vacuum. And then, cause then it's easier to say, well, we're not lying. We did test it. You know, it's like, reminds me of that Mark Twain quote where he says there's lies, damned lies, and then statistics, you know? And I was talking with someone that worked for a pharmaceutical company, and they were telling me about how, you know, how they manipulate the stats to show what they want to show so they can market the things they want to market the way they want to market it and sell it and make the profits and do all that stuff. So yeah, it's massive manipulation.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like, first of all of this safety testing isn't even done by government agencies. It's done in-house by the chemical company scientists. And then they take these studies and they, for instance, send it to the EPA or the FDA, and then the EPA and FDA evaluate these studies. Like, for example, Roundup is pretty popular. You heard it in the news these days, that Monsanto chemical formulation. So basically, they claim it's like 100% safe. In fact, like most of these chemical companies claim their chemicals are 100% safe, but ironically never release the studies they actually produced to claim that. Like the weird thing is they're released at times if there is like some kind of lawsuit, and then they're released, or like some kind of disgruntled employee leaks some papers here and there. But basically, like if you're proud of your research and if your product was 100% safe as you claim, like why wouldn't you be happy to disclose that?
Right.
Wouldn't that be a groundbreaking research discovery?
Yeah.
Why do you have to hide it? Like if you graduated from Stanford, why would you not put it on your damn resume?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's a tough marketplace, you know, and people are trying to make money. So just remember that, like a lot of times there's corners being cut and stuff like that. And don't kind of trust it on just the surface value, which was the concept behind my book, because I try to kind of make it easy to navigate around all this trickery and labeling claims. And to kind of tie back a little bit more to our conversation earlier is like the third biggest one in terms of myths I hear is like sometimes they're like, oh, the trace amounts are so small, it doesn't matter. But if you kind of look up a myriad of studies on PubMed.gov, you'll see like a lot of these chemicals have a negative impact on your body, even in parts per trillion, which is like one drop in 3 size Olympic swimming pools. And they will still have like an impact on your health. And you're not only having that one, once again, you're not only having that one active ingredient. Like the average newborn born in America has trace amounts of 200 different chemicals in their bloodstream already. And that's
Yeah.
just how they're
Wow.
starting
I mean,
life.
yeah, this is, in my opinion, like, I mean, I want to say this is everything, because I mean, everybody eats, everybody goes to the grocery store, everybody gets food. And of course, there's a lot of people that maybe don't think about what they're putting in their body, but there's a lot of people that do. And there's a lot of people that care and they think they're doing the good thing and they think they're informed and they're like, hey, I'm making it happen. And what we put in our bodies is so important, even if it is just these trace elements. I mean, who knows what kind of effects they could have on us, like we were talking about before, like even maybe directly or later down in life, and what kind of cancer and disease and sickness and all kinds of different things that are going on. Yeah, like that's such a major part of it. I mean, it's like who is it? Heraclitus? It was Heraclitus? Or what? No, Hippocrates. Hippocrates, right? Let food be thy medicine, medicine be thy food.
Yeah, exactly. And then to kind of tie back to your question earlier of what people can do, obviously that's like a huge topic to consider. A really interesting and entertaining book I found is Civilized to Death by Dr. Ryan. I forget his first name, but it's like a very
oh yeah, yeah. It's a good friend of mine. Had him on the show. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yep. That's actually how I found how I found your podcast, listening to his podcast interviews.
Oh, cool.
So I find his conversations like entertaining, and just that topic entertaining in general. But yeah, I mean, it's not obviously being healthy isn't a core priority in most people's lives anymore. It's kind of like the most important things to kind of like your life, for instance, are like good food, good healthy food, good sleep, good relationships, just like love towards yourself. That's kind of taking a back burner, especially in America. Like first thing is work 10 hours a day. And for most people who work a job you don't want to definitely be working in 10 hours a day. And then with the remaining time you have, which there basically is no remaining time, you do everything else,
Yeah.
So it's more of a core priority issue. And my book isn't meant to transition that group of people into eating healthier. My book is meant for people that already made the decision that they want to eat healthier, that they want to source high quality food, but are just confused on how to navigate around all these labeling claims.
Yeah.
So that's my main thing. And to provide solutions, because it sounds like I'm just complaining a lot, and I'm not. I have like very reasonable solutions in the book. Like in relation to our beef conversation, you can get really high quality source beef from a website called eatwild.com. It has a interactive map, so you can click on the state you're from, and it'll show you arrows exactly to where legit 100% pasture raised operations are. And all of these companies do at-home delivery. So you can just order from them and then it'll show up at your door. Another great one in terms of the beef is AmericanGrassFedAssociation.com. That's a very, very good company, incredible company, a certification body rather, to purchase high quality beef and pork from. And you can go to AmericanGrassFedAssociation.com, and they also have an interactive mini map. You just kind of think it's at the bottom of their website. You just kind of click on the state and it'll show you exactly where all these farms are near your place. And there's a bunch of farms in every state. The factory farm industry hasn't totally destroyed small farming. It's very accessible if you still want it.
Yeah.
So providing a very easy, reasonable solution to the problem I mentioned instead of just listing problems.
Well, this is great because for the people that are listening to this right now and the people that do care, like you said, the people that are interested, like taking action to move in those directions. I wrote those websites down. I'll put them in the show notes and I'm going to check them out too, because it's like that's kind of where we're at right now, is where we have to kind of like go against the grain, pun intended. Like we have to sort of put in a little bit of more extra effort if we want to see some more changes occur that are going to actually be a little bit more convenient and easy for us. Because right now the convenient thing is go to Sprouts, go to Whole Foods, go to Trader Joe's, wherever you go, and just get your stuff. And, a lot of the time, sometimes I'll go and I'll be like, Well, they're selling it at Whole Foods, so I guess it must be good, because it's Whole Foods, and it's the convenience, like you mentioned. You work 10 hours a day, you're at a job you don't want to be at, and then all the advertising. Oh, come out and eat this. The best burger is 17 strips of bacon, and it's like, man, we want that pleasure. We want that release because we're spending all of our time doing things that we don't want to do, and then but really, for the people that are listening, the people that are interested, voting with our dollars and like moving into a different space will then I think will then kind of create more of that opportunity to exist if more people are taking action to go in that direction. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of would have to agree and disagree a little bit on that one with the voting with your dollar mentality. And it does work to a certain degree, but the problem these days is, so first of all, if people are interested in shopping at the grocery store, a quick solution for that is cornucopia.com or .net. I forgot exactly, but it gives an overview of every single item you'll find in the supermarket, and it gives you a rating of how factory farmed that food is.
Okay, cool.
That's another solution if you really are dead set on sticking to the supermarket. There are still things you can buy at the supermarket that are good for you, that do have good production practices, but it's kind of like, I would say 10% even at Whole Foods. And then the rest of the 90% is just junk, like factory farm stuff that, like for instance, another tricky part with crops is for my research, the US is the only country that allows hydroponic vegetables and fruits to be certified as organic. So the bulk majority of tomatoes, bell peppers, and at least blueberries and lettuce in my area are just come from hydroponics, even the organic ones. So they're not even grown in soil.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes people are like, oh, what's wrong with hydroponics? And honestly, I can't give them super dead on scientific research showing that there is a lower nutritional profile, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I do know, just using common sense, is the Earth has been around for 4.5 billion years of extremely complicated evolution that even the best scientists only have a super vague, maybe even inaccurate understanding of.
Right.
And it took that long of super, super complicated evolution to form the type of soil necessary to produce that kind of crop naturally. So by growing it through an IV drip in a container in some weird chemical solution, if you think that's the same crop, I don't know what to tell you,
Right, yeah.
With food, I always say, presume guilty until proven innocent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's your best strategy. Because how many times have you heard, I think it was Paul Chek that also said this as well, but basically every drug that ended up killing someone was at one point scientifically proven to be completely safe.
Right.
And how many of those commercials do you hear on the news every single day? Oh, contact this law firm if you took this antidepressant, or contact this law firm if you took this high blood pressure medication,
Yeah.
You hear that all the time, dude. And I wouldn't be surprised if through a long enough time span, every single one of these pharmaceutical companies proved to actually mess up your health more than actually helping you in the long run. My interpretation of pharmaceutical drugs is basically, my good friend Jator Pierre gave me this one, is basically a child will know how to solve this problem, but an adult will not. And that's basically if you have a rock stuck inside your shoe, a child would just take their shoe off and take the rock out to avoid the pain, and then put the shoe back on and continue walking in a comfortable manner. But an adult, they'll just take painkillers and continue to walk with the rock inside their shoe.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Dude, that's the summary of the pharmaceutical industry and America in general. I think I read some article, I'm not an expert in this area, but I read some article and it said close to 80% of Americans are on some kind of pharmaceutical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's why I think it's all tied together. I mean, we have this natural interconnected web, and, with these really complex, ecosystems and learning and information sharing, and, the crops and the plants and the soil and the animals and the human, and but we've meddled with it. Yeah. Our whole approach in the West is Band-Aids on bullet wounds. It's just take this, just isolate this one thing. If we could just identify this one bad guy. Oh, okay. So, the pesticides that'll the Roundup, that'll solve the problem. We'll just keep adding more of these stupid solutions onto that are not really solutions, that are just kind of like these band-aids or these things that actually make it worse. I don't even know what the analogy is. Like, it's like pouring like acid on a wound or something. And it's just like, what, getting back to, like you said, the earth knows what it's doing. It's been doing it for millions of years. So yeah, this whole thing is, and as you alluded to, Chris Ryan's book, Civilized to Death, it's like, it all ties in together to this whole fucking operation. I like to say that, like, in a sense, we kind of live in like a factory farm. I mean, look at what we do to the animals. I mean, that's sort of what I think is being done to us in a way, right? And like producing and consuming and going to work and not having the time to think about any of this stuff. Just keep on the treadmill. Don't worry about it. Get sick. Buy these things. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
so how do we escape?
Yeah. I don't know. That's a good question. I don't have like a thorough solution for that.
Well, you have. But, I mean, what you've been talking about. These are parts of the solution. It takes work. It takes practice. It takes informing ourselves and taking the time to, if we do care about these things, and also I think it stems from like, do we care about ourselves? It's like, if you care about yourself.
Yeah, and that's the problem, because that's the, I guess, etiology of the problem is, once again, I mentioned, like, just health isn't a core priority. And the problem is like, most people start developing issues like in their 40s or 50s and then start taking action. But the problem with that strategy is you've already invested like how many thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars into the factory farmed industry, the pharmaceutical industry before that happens,
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of these Ponzi schemes. It's like people keep dropping off, but because the money keeps flowing in at a certain funnel, it just keeps going,
right. Yeah. What about, and you brought up like also like eating out. Like I cook a lot, but I also eat out too. And I try and go to places that I think are good, but that I never really kind of like investigate them. I mean, it reminds me of this. I don't know if you ever saw the Portlandia episode. I think it was like one of their early episodes where they go to like a restaurant and they're asking the waitress like, oh, is this organic? And she's like, yeah. And then they're like, oh, is it farm raised? And like all these questions lead to a series of like, from them being at the restaurant to then like going to the kitchen and like talking to the chef and then like driving to the farm and like talking to the farmer and then like talking to the chicken. It's like all these questions about how the things are raised and all this stuff. So when eating out, like what do you think about, because I mean, a lot of people do eat out. I mean, it's a big part of our culture now. I think more people eat out now more than ever before. And so when eating out, you see a place and you're like, I mean, are there certain kinds of questions or things that we should look for or know when eating out?
Yeah, so I still eat out as well, but honestly, when I eat out, all I do is just select like wild caught fish. That's the only thing I'll ever eat when I eat out.
Oh, wow.
And the problem with that is, even with that strategy, there's a big problem, because even these fancy, like high-end, expensive restaurants, they're still using industrial cooking oils like canola oil and all those like super pro-inflammatory oils that kind of shoot your inflammation way up. We can be ordering, like, for instance, I could be ordering like sockeye salmon fished out of somewhere in Alaska, and they could just be cooking it in canola oil. And then the food group becomes toxic in that point. So I think you'll be really hard pressed. I haven't ever been able to find a single restaurant that uses like good sourced oils, or maybe no oils at all. Like, I don't even cook with oils at home.
How come you don't? So I'll use olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil. Sometimes I'll use. What's the deal with the oils?
So for me, so first of all, like a large portion of those oils are imported from countries where the regulatory bodies of those countries can't even manage serious crime in their countries.
Yeah.
So how are they going to go out of their way to make sure to manage agricultural irregularities in compliance rates?
Right. Wow.
So there's that. Like, for instance, like going back to the grain question, since we covered that so much, like 50% of the grain that is in the U.S. is imported from like super corrupt countries like Turkey and Ukraine. Right. And I'm from Ukraine, so nothing personal, just talking about facts here. It's super corrupt. I think Ukraine's probably one of the most corrupt countries in the world. And there's a tremendous amount of corruption at the broker level. So what happens is the Ukrainian farmer would farm conventionally using a lot of like pesticides, for instance. They would put these grains into a container on the docks. Some kind of broker or something would just switch the paperwork and import it as organic. And this happens
Yeah,
all
because
the
what do they
time.
care? They're making
I know
money.
the
Yeah, they
Washington
don't give a shit. Yeah.
I know the Washington Post did like an investigative piece on it. People can Google it and find it. I'm sure it'll be easy to find. And so even when you're buying, like, for instance, let's say free range chicken, which doesn't mean anything, and it says vegetarian fed on the label, vegetarian fed, remember, chickens are like omnivores in this case. They should be eating bugs, insects, all that stuff. But vegetarian fed meaning grain fed. Where are they getting their grains from? From these, like 50% chance from these corrupt countries. And even if it says organic, I mean, is it really organic? I
Right.
doubt it,
Yeah. I'll go to the supermarket and cage free, farm fresh, organic. That sounds good. And look, there's like a happy chicken and he's dancing around in a field, free range chicken. So even that, you can't trust that either.
Yeah, like free range. So first of all, another deceptive label I fell for years is product of the USA. So legally, any company can claim product of, like, I can ship in carcasses from Mexico, process them into like pig carcasses from Mexico, process them into packages here and label it product of the USA.
Damn. Yeah, a lot of people talking about different countries and stuff, like a lot of people will say, like, yeah, when I go to France, the food tastes different there. It's when I go to Italy, the food, the tomatoes are different. Everything's different. The meat's different. It tastes different there. Even in Asian countries, there's the different flavor profiles, different textures. There's richer, and so are there certain places in the world where they are kind of doing things more correctly, more in a biodynamic way, or just do you think this problem is specifically, like you mentioned, it's like a Western problem, definitely United States, some other places? But yeah, I hear that, and people do talk about that, and it's always interesting because it's like, I mean, why do we have to wash our food before we eat it? Why does the food taste, why does beef taste different here than it tastes in France, for example? Are there places where they're doing it in the world that it's like, oh, that's the model we should be following?
Well, I mean, to answer your question in terms of beef, why it tastes different, they're most likely using a different breed because there's so many different breeds of cattle. So it could still be like most of the food, even in Western Europe, is factory farmed. I think like I was in Germany maybe like a few months ago, and I did notice, shockingly to my surprise, they did have Demeter certified, which is a biodynamic certification program, produce like a decent amount of it in the supermarket, which was like, I don't know, 15 to 20% of the total amount of goods in the supermarket. But then the rest of it was still all factory farmed. And honestly, even going to Europe, I mean, most of the people there are still overweight,
Right.
and full of like mental and physical pain. Obviously, there's more to the puzzle than just eating well. There's more to the puzzle of health and wellness than just eating well. Although, like, I would have to say nutrition is one of the main pillars. Nutrition, sleep, good movement, and then also a genuine happiness in your life, not one of those faked antidepressant type happiness,
Right. Side effects may include
Those are the
suicide.
four pillars. I mean, it doesn't get much more complicated than that. Those are the four variables. If you really genuinely master those, and also master the concept of managing your central nervous system, like not working too much, but not working too little. Everyone is different in that one. So you got to find that, as Aristotle would say, golden mean.
Yeah.
That kind of balance that works well for you. And that balance changes all the time too. 1 week you could work a lot and feel okay. Then the next week you need to cut back. You know what I mean? Your equilibrium changes.
Yeah, because that stress has a major impact on us too, and it probably leads to inflammation as well. Stress, and I'm sure the animals are under tremendous amounts of stress being in these horrible conditions, and then when we're eating that. So, yeah, that plays a role in the health as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, for those that are kind of more spiritually inclined, there is that Native American belief that, like, if you eat the flesh of a miserable animal, you also gain the misery of that animal.
Oh, I believe it. Yeah.
I don't know too much. I know you know a lot more about this than I do, but one of my friends that does psychedelics, he told me one time he just experimented with like eating doing something. I forgot exactly the substance he took, but he took the substance and then he ate like some kind of like factory farmed animal meat, and he felt like I don't know, this tremendous amount of terror,
Oh,
like flowing
man.
through his body while on it. I forgot the exact details of the story, but anyway, so there is something to that. Like if you eat the flesh of like a miserable animal that was raised. I mean, even in these free range chicken operations we kind of hinted at before. I mean, in California, the average space is like 1 to 1.2 square feet per chicken. That's basically like a printing paper.
Yeah, I've changed dramatically over the last few years, and for me, I think that psychedelics and my spiritual practices have made me more in tune with all like life, and just like, man, like these are living beings, and to have them in these conditions and then to be eating them in these conditions, I mean, it's just terrible. I still eat meat. I eat mainly plant-based, and I have a lot of friends that are vegetarians and vegans, and I think that a large part of their thinking also involves the kind of the moral of it, and like the ethical things about eating meat and that sort of thing, but also the health component too. And so maybe there's a lot of people also listening to this show that are like, hey, I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan, like I get organic stuff and I'm good, I'm not participating in this thing. Is there any kind of well, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, yeah, what would, I guess, what would we say? I mean, we touched on it though. We did. We touched on the pesticides and stuff, but what about sort of like the aspect of just like eliminating meat totally from your diet and like, okay, cool, I'm not part of the problem anymore. But then you're still eating these vegetables and stuff. I mean, these are also monocrops and part of the subsidized agriculture, big farm industry, right?
Yeah, honestly, like this is like a pretty deep topic, and in my opinion, like both, whether you should eat meat or whether not, have as many rights and as many wrongs. You know what I mean? Um, uh, Unfortunately, when you have like a population that's as big as the U.S., that's as big as even the world population, there's going to be a huge impact on wildlife, whether you're eating them or not.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
To make room for, first of all of this cropland that's kind of destroying wildlife is kind of, I guess, burned down and plowed for crops, not for animals.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So by being a vegetarian, you're eating vegetables, but that's exactly what all these monocrop operations are for. They're growing vegetables. They're not growing meat. And only like about maybe 25 to 30%, I don't know this number exactly off the top of my head, but a fairly small percent of it is going towards factory farms. Most of it is going towards like ethanol production. And then I forgot the small percentages going to other things. I don't know that
Yeah.
topic too well, but
Yeah. Yeah. And
when you have like 8 billion, I don't know how many people are on the planet now, 7 or 8 billion.
yeah.
When you have that many people on the planet, it creates an imbalance,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
in kind of the ecosystem of the entire planet. So it's like, honestly, the most common sense solution is to die down the population, but people aren't going to like hearing that.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, I know. It's like not.
Or expand, or I don't know too much about space travel, expand to other planets. Those are the two basic solutions. But in my opinion, like before the expansion to other planets happen, the population has to be cut down significantly.
Yeah. And we have to
And
kind of
obviously people
learn.
aren't going to do that because, what am I going to go? Are you going to go? It's tough to make that decision.
Yeah, we don't want to just like replicate what we're doing now on like Mars or something. Like I think we want to get back to the roots of good health and good, nature too, and all that kind of stuff. And the other thing that I was thinking of, I remember being in Peru and in the Amazon, and there we had a talk by this guy Chris Killam, the medicine hunter, and he was talking about like acai and like where acai comes from and maca, and it comes from this particular location in the Peruvian Andes, and like there's certain kinds of people that have just made their lives like, you know, with this. But now, because it's becoming so popular in the West, that they're kind of entering into this like global civilized so-called, you know, money system where big, you know, companies are coming in and they're extracting that out, and it's taking away from the sort of small kind of maybe, you know, biodynamic operations that they had, similar to what you were talking about with like the Tyson and the factory farm and the subsidy thing. So it's like even that, because you brought this up too earlier, like the sort of, because I see it, right, and you're in California, you know, I'm in Denver, but there's these kind of, you know, trendy kind of more expensive places, and you know, you can go and get, you know, acai bowls and smoothies and all this stuff, but like is that also part of like it seems like everything has some kind of cost to it and some kind of problem associated, even when we think that we're eating the cleanest things, Hawaiian spirulina and, you know, all this stuff. So in like carbon footprint, you know, that plays into it, right, too. So it's like,
Yeah.
shit, man, like, you know, it's like, fuck, like what, you know, we're trying to do good and we're trying to eat healthy, but and help the planet and the biodiversity and everything. But it seems like everywhere you go, there's a little something attached to it. So what's the solution? Just like reduce the level of problem attachment to wherever you go and whatever you do? I mean, that's sort of the play?
You know, I'm not sure I'm the best kind of example to provide a solution for that more sustainable system. I mean, like a few things I do is I wear kind of like, I've been wearing the same jacket for basically like 5 years already.
Right.
You know, like I buy like an expensive one. I forget the company's name, but it's a mountain climbing one. And then I just have that for a long time instead of buying many cheap ones, you know, and kind of try to take care of it. Another thing in terms of how I transition out of buying factory farm food is very gradual. It took like a few years. So first uh, I bought like 90% factory farm food and then 10% organic. Then like a few months later, I'll buy 20% organic supermarket organic. Then like a year later, I'm buying 100% supermarket organic, where now I'm like buying 50% supermarket organic and 50% I order from kind of those websites that I mentioned to you. A great one for those vegetarians out there, Farm Fresh to You is great. They source from local farmers. It's organic. They uh, rotate their crops seasonally, et cetera, et cetera, and they kind of deliver straight to your door. And it's like a subscription. You get to pick which vegetables and fruit you want, and then they kind of based on the season, and then they deliver that to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember in New York, I had signed up for this like co-op thing, and where they basically just would deliver like a box of vegetables. And I think I asked for some chicken too, or whatever I think it was whatever they had there, like whatever they were growing locally in that season was sent to you. So yeah, I mean, what about stuff like that, like co-ops, or even, I mean, growing your own food? I mean, I know it's probably really difficult for a lot of people to do, but yeah, any thoughts on those ways of going about it?
Yeah, I mean, I grow like a little bit of my own crops, and then we used to have a few chickens as well. We don't have those chickens anymore. Me and my girlfriend, that's what I'm speaking about. But honestly, I keep that out of the book. I think that'll be a great solution, but I don't think it's realistic for like 99.99999% of people, you know? So I moreover try to kind of show them the easy way of making the transitions that I made from like factory farm food to supermarket level organic, then buying from like actually legit uh, like organic pasture raised operations or biodynamic operations of those websites that I mentioned to you. There are many more websites and they're included in my book. The book comes with like an extensive video series as
Oh,
well.
cool. Oh, nice.
So I kind of basically walk a person through the entire supermarket and show them exactly like what all the labels mean. Uh, Going back to really quick, the beef one, this one kind of pissed me off for a while because I kind of fell for this one for a long time. I saw the 100% grass fed label on some beef that I used to buy, and I bought that for like a year. And then at one point, I was just bored at home, and I gave the company a call, and I'm like, "Oh, how are your guys' operations, et cetera, et cetera?" And they're honest about it, and they're like, "Oh, we finish our cattle with grass pellets in a feedlot."
Mm.
So it's like it could get very tricky. But honestly, if you just go to those websites and then obviously I'm not trying to sell my book, but in the book I make it like
No,
very
please.
easy as well.
Let's do it. Let's sell your book. I'm gonna buy it. I want to know. I want to get into that video. So if I buy the paperback version of your book, it comes with a video series too.
Yeah, they'll be able to have access to, I forgot the exact time frame, but maybe like an hour and a half of video content where I break down. We talked extensively about beef, but I also talk extensively about chicken, pork, fish, water, supplements, vegetables, fruit, turkey as well. So a lot of food category groups.
Yeah, and I see here also too. You talk about how to source quality water and supplements as well. That's pretty important too, because a lot of people are talking about that now. Like there's a water crisis or something. Like what? That's news to me. I didn't know that. I thought water was readily available. I mean, it seems like, fuck, man. Like the world that I want to live in is not such a complicated world. It's like you grow your vegetables, you have your animals, you get your water from the stream or whatever, but now it's such a mess. So your book is, and the videos and stuff is helping to kind of navigate this mess, because that's what we need. We need these guides out there. But what's up with water? I mean, you don't have to get too deep into it, because I know it's in the book. But if you want to give a little, and supplements too, if you want to kind of maybe touch on that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah. So water, obviously that's outside of like love, in my opinion, that's the most important nutrient to optimize your health. Out of all the nutrients out there, so every single cell in your body kind of requires consistent inflow of water to keep functioning. I guess my recommendation is, so typically there are 3 variables you have to look for when determining whether water is ideal to drink. There's the pH, there's the total dissolved solids, and there's the hardness of the water. So ideally, like from my research, the pH should be about 78. The total dissolved solids should be about 300 parts per million, and the hardness should be about 120 parts per million. The good thing is you can go online on Amazon, for instance, and order like a pH tester, a total dissolved solids tester, and a hardness tester for like $30 for all of those. And then basically you test your water out of your faucet. And I'll talk about that. I know the faucet thing, the tap water is a controversial thing, but I'll talk about that in a second. Then you kind of test it with those tools. If it comes in ideal for those numbers, the next step would be to determine what's the chemical content of this water that I'm drinking. So in that case, for your tap water, everyone can contact their water utility company, and they're required to send you a free toxicology report of your water. Sometimes they also have it listed on their website in a PDF format. So first, okay, you determined that the water is good to drink in terms of those 3 variables we mentioned a second ago. Next, chemical content. Okay, so I got this report. In my area, the water utility company is very, very good, and there's still trace amounts of like 20 to 30 chemicals in the water that they test for. They only test for maybe like 120 chemicals total, but there are obviously thousands of chemicals in the market and in the ecosystem. So even with that, even from those 120 plus chemicals that they tested for, maybe like 20 to 30 still came out. Trace amounts of those chemicals are still in the water. So you can imagine if they tested for every single chemical, I might be getting a few hundred trace amounts of a few hundred different chemicals per glass of water. And what I would do then, if I'm dead set on just drinking the water from home, is I would take that report and then I would go to kind of like a local company that sells water filters, give them that report and tell them I need a filter specifically to filter out all these chemicals. Because not every filter is the same. This filter filters this out, this filter filters that out. I forgot there's a really good book on showing exactly which filter filters what out. And I listed it in my book, but I just forgot it off the top of my head. But then basically you get the filter to counter those chemicals. But then the tricky part is here, it gets like very, very tricky, because the more you filter the water, the more of the nutrients you kill in the water as well.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like a lose-lose game. It's like, for instance, water treated with reverse osmosis or distilled water, it has like a pH of like 2. It's like very acidic water, and almost probably no hardness or very little total dissolved solids as well.
Shit.
So the hardness would be the magnesium and calcium content of the water, basically, or also some other
Right.
electrolytes
And
as
then you
well.
gotta, well, if you're deficient in that, then you're taking supplements and you gotta spend money on that or whatever. I mean, it's, yeah. And you know, like that's a good point, because I heard a good point about testing and then bringing it to there and finding out if it does that. Cause it's not like a one size fits all thing. Cause I heard that this water filter called the Berkey water filter, like that's the best one. It's the best one to get. It's very expensive, but it's the best one to get. But it might not be filtering out maybe some of the things that are in your water in your local area, right?
Yeah, and this one, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know much about the Berkey water system. I'll check it out actually a little bit after. I've heard that one a few times. I'll check it out a little bit after our episode here. But um, if you want to get rid of all the chemical content like present in your water, I think the best way to go is the reverse osmosis or just water distillation unit. But then that's remineralized in like seaweed and all this other stuff. I don't know exactly how they do that, but there are like many companies, typically called like water breweries, that do that.
Oh, cool.
So then they bring the total dissolved solids, the hardness, and the pH back to its optimal numbers, but without that chemical content present as well. However, I think there's like a little bit of a setback here too, because even the best scientists in the world that study water are still confused by the content of water.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're doing that filtration system, sure, you're rebalancing it with those three variables, which is a good step in the right direction. But who knows what you're destroying in the process?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know. I highly doubt even the best scientists in the world know, because they're still like the guy I like to follow a lot is Dr. Pollack. He's the author of Fourth Phase of Water. I forgot the name of the exact book, but I'm pretty sure you can Google it and find
Mm-hmm.
it. He's the most credible water researcher, in my opinion. I like following his stuff a lot. There's another good book called You're Not Sick, You're Thirsty by Dr. He has like a very long Iranian last name. I forget it. It starts with a B. His nickname is Dr. Batman because it kind of sounds like Batman, but then it's like 10 times longer.
Cool.
Um, that's another great book. So yeah, I mean, that subject is tricky. I think it's kind of like, because the ecosystem is so polluted these days, like the coal plant shoots up mercury into the clouds, then the mercury goes in the clouds, rains into the water, then in the seawater or in the lake, it's transformed into methyl mercury. Then that makes it into, then that evaporates and goes back into the clouds. Then that rains back down into the crops. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. The vicious cycle.
It's kind of like, yeah, exactly. And I guess a deeper question is, my question is, once all these chemical companies, they close shop and all the executives walk away, billionaires basically, like who's left to pick up the mess?
Yeah, right. I mean, I can't help but think, and I've been thinking about this a lot. I can't help but think that this is all part of, I mean, it all stems from this kind of, monolithic money system that we're in, where it's like, everything is guided by profit. Like, what is going to maximize profit? What is going to give us the best return? What's going to keep Tyson, Purdue, and all these other companies in business and getting what's going to keep the people in government, rolling along and filling their pockets, and what's going to keep the pharmaceutical companies in business. And it's all feeding this machine, feeding this status quo machine. Really, what I think, what we're seeing is now, with your work and your information, thank you so much for bringing this and shedding light on this, because we need people out there to shine lights in little directions. And then maybe we can transition into because maybe there's not a whole bunch of massive amounts of money to be made by like small little operations where people actually show care and love for what they're doing and care about what they're providing for people. But maybe that's the better way. I think that's the better way to more health and more like actual wealth, like the wealth of health. Right. So yeah, I don't know, just a comment there about like, cause it seems like every maneuver that we make is a maneuver within this kind of limited sandbox of this dominant economic system, that kind of restricts people from, you're forced to make these choices. Like you brought up before with the farmers, like they come and they present you with this model and it's like, well, I mean, I guess this is going to be what's good for me and my family. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to, I think you might be a lot into this, but kind of just diving into yourself and finding out who you really are. And a lot of people, honestly, most people are never going to do that in their whole life.
Yeah.
Most people are just going to be, even grown adults are inside like 12-year-old kids,
Yeah.
like for their whole life, you know? Secretly, bulk majority of people, they want to be told what to do. So the government and these corporations are doing what they want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like very few people are going to go kind of rogue and do their own thing and be the person like they really want to be, the core values that have their life represent the core values that really mean something to them, you know?
Yeah.
So that's kind of obviously the etiology of the problem that led to the food problem as well. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's the rot
I
of
guess
the
that's it.
core. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It all stems from there. Eugene, what are some of the most common questions, I guess, that you get? I mean, maybe we address some of them on the show, but I'm sure you probably have people reaching out to you all the time, and or even through the book, and just kind of being asking questions about maybe what they should do or what the problems are or what some some things are. But what do you see, I guess, as maybe it could be a two-part kind of question where it's like the most common misconceptions and the most common questions that you hear, or the things that are at the top of your mind that you're thinking about, or maybe, I don't know, worrying about, or just kind of taking notice of.
Yeah. So I'm a fat loss coach in the Orange County area. And I guess in relation to that question, like I would recommend if a person does want to lose weight or become in shape, just find out like the root cause of what led you to find it acceptable to get out of shape, to gain all that weight to begin with,
Yeah.
and solve it at that level. Don't focus on working out. Don't even You could focus on eating well. Sometimes if a body is so toxic, it produces toxic thinking as
Yeah.
well. So you can kind of clean it out a little bit from eating there. But don't worry about working out. Don't worry about all that stuff. Just worry about finding out like the real core reason why you became so overweight to begin with. And don't fake it. Some good resources are, like I have my first book, The Laws of Aesthetics. It covers that topic as well. Some other good resources are, um, I really liked Paul Chek's PPS Mastery series. The first one is called Living Your Legacy DVD series. I think it's like a 16-hour DVD series that talks about how to really identify your genuine core values and live by them. That's going to cause, once you start doing that, that's going to decrease your stress levels a tremendous amount because you'll actually be living the life you want to be living. And then his other two, it's like the first one, second one, and third one, and I think you'll be good to go from there. But all of that series is pretty cool as well. Um, so I like those two. I don't know if that
Yeah.
answers your questions. I
No,
go on tangents sometimes. I
no,
forget what I was
that's
going to
good.
say.
And you mentioned, being the fat loss coach. I didn't know that initially, and because I was kind of just keyed into the anti-factory farming, but now I see laws of aesthetics, definitive blueprint to rapid fat loss, the perfect body, and living a health-centered lifestyle. So yeah, that obviously ties into it, right? I mean, because yeah, I had a period of time where I got fat, and I'm like, gee, and it was, because I was depressed. I was not in a good mental state, and food was a thing that connected with me. Some people connect with drugs or alcohol or other things like that, but food was this kind of toxic comfort. It was this immediate gratification comfort that I could feel something and maybe stuff myself, and I feel like, I don't know, like I'm alive in some kind of way, but yeah, and it leads me to think about like this kind of like body positive movement thing. And I think that, obviously we shouldn't like fat shame people and make fun of people, and we shouldn't like be cruel to people just because they're overweight, obviously. But then also it's like, I don't know, maybe like, should we be like promoting like people that are overweight and fat? Like, it doesn't seem to me, that doesn't seem really healthy, or that it does anything to contribute any sort of progress. Like, I don't know, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what to say on that subject. I guess from one vantage point, someone can look at it and be like, "Oh, well, these people are supporting the factory farm system,"
Yeah.
which is creating this loop of the pharmaceutical industry, for instance, 80% of the antibiotics sold are sold to the farming industry.
Huh.
So they're like one in one. It's like the farming industry sets up all these diseases, and then the pharmaceutical industry has a solution for the problem they created too.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like they make money both ways, and then one person can make the argument that like it's this kind of mindset that's leading, to the promotion of that type of industry, because typically the people that eat that shitty food eventually become reliant on the drugs as well, like the pharmaceutical drugs, to try to get better, but they never really get better doing all that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then also, on the other hand, I don't think like making fun of a person is going to solve anything either,
Oh, yeah.
or fat shaming them.
Right.
And a lot of people do that in the fitness industry that I've been in. I've already been coaching for like 13 or 14 years, so quite a while. And that is a common tactic to kind of fat shame people, but it doesn't do anything because, first of all, there's a really good program called like 1, 2, 3, 4 Overcoming Obesity and Disease. And for my interpretation of that program, it's kind of like you have to look at it in multiple layers. And I cover this a lot in the first book as well. But basically, fat gain is a symptom of poor lifestyle and nutrition choices. But poor lifestyle and nutrition choices are a symptom of a mindset that doesn't facilitate healthy living. And a mindset that doesn't facilitate healthy living that leads to that weight gain is basically a symptom of a couple of different variables. One, the person doesn't feel safe in the real world to express who they are, presuming they know who they are first. And because they don't feel safe in the real world being who they are, they kind of seek out comfort in this addiction, in this case, the addiction to food, because food provides them unconditional love. It also provides them control. They're able to eat the food when they want it, and they're able to put the food away when they want it. And the food doesn't judge them. It just gives them pleasure. Another common thing is people don't know who they are. So they feel kind of lost inside, like empty inside, which leads them once again in the food topic, the obesity topic, right back to that food. It provides them a safe place to eat, to nourish themselves, and to have control over their life. Also, another thing that's common, according to that 1, 2, 3, 4 Overcoming Obesity product, is there's oftentimes seems like a love-hate relationship in the person's life. So a typical one is, I've been together with this person for 10 years. I did actually genuinely love them initially, but now we have 2 kids and it's 10 years later and I just don't love them anymore. But you're with them, and this is causing a lot of stress inside of you because you're not able to kind of express your true self, most likely at work, because combined people working jobs they don't want because those jobs aren't expressing their core values. And then coming home and once again being in that environment where you can't express your core values,
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can see how this provides like an insidious stress on a cellular
Oh, yeah.
level on a person's body just all day, every day, 365 days a year. And that's why these days, pretty much, and I've gone to many countries in the world, anywhere you walk outside, probably easily 9 out of 10 people you see are full of mental and physical pain, full of disease and obesity.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's obvious. I mean, you don't have to do the study. You know what? Just go walk outside today, like anywhere in America. You even pick the place and you'll see that I'm right.
Yeah, it's so, man, wow. Thanks for sharing that. That was pretty profound, actually. I mean, yeah, it's just, and like you mentioned, you come home and you're stressed and there's the food and and you're isolated. You're alone. You're not in community. You're not with other people that are because that's a lot of that is what we need is other people to be. I try and surround myself with people that are living healthy and going on hikes and physically active and eating good and just trying to loving themselves and taking care of themselves. And I think that for everyone listening out there too, like if you don't have those people in your life, find them, because that is going to make a massive difference. Like, we don't have to do this alone. We could do this together. And I think doing it together is sort of the way that makes it fun too, and makes it easier. And then you start feeling better. And when everybody's feeling good, then, better things can be created. So yeah, I know now, we're kind of like in this holiday season, I guess we would say. We just had Thanksgiving, and Christmas is coming up, and I'm going to be going back home to New York and visiting my family and stuff, and there's going to be all kinds of food and treats and desserts and things like that. And what do you do when you're at, like, I mean, I guess my mom's going to make some chicken or turkey or whatever she's going to, so it's like, everyone's going to be surrounded in this kind of environment, and obviously everyone gets in these situations in life where it's like, well, I'll make an exception. So, I mean, I guess sometimes exceptions are okay, but other times, I don't know. I mean, what do you think? Is it like, is it a big deal to go and kind of just, I don't know, eat shitty, like crappy food for like a week and then like return? It's difficult. Or maybe I should start pressing my family as to like where they're buying their stuff, and like, how militant, I guess, should we be in our approach to this in terms of our health? Like, is it okay to deviate once in a while and eat stuff that's just not that great? I mean, we're pretty malleable and adaptive. Like, we could bounce back, right? It's not
Yeah.
going to like be the end of the world.
I would just say, you know what, eat whatever you want. Just make sure your sourcing is legit. Like, why can't you eat turkey, but just make sure it's sourced from like a pasture raised operation that's the turkey is an omnivore, so make sure they're fed worms, bugs, even reptiles. You can feed reptiles to turkeys. If they're supplemented with some grain, that's okay too, but just make sure they have that balance in their diet and they're not just fed GMO
Cool.
corn and
Yeah,
soy,
I'm gonna bring that up.
So yeah, it's just all
Yeah.
about sourcing. I'm not saying you have to be super strict with your diet. I'm just saying source your food correctly. So if you want to eat steak, you want to eat some good lasagna or whatever you want to eat, just make sure the sourcing is really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that one of the most important things, because I'm gonna start talking about this too, because one of the things that I hadn't done for a while is like being around friends and family. Of course, like, this show, obviously I talk a lot about psychedelics and consciousness and things like that, and so even with food, just, yeah, for people listening out there, like introduce these ideas to your family, like invite them in for a conversation about this kind of stuff, and it doesn't have to be aggressive, it doesn't have to be talking down, but just like ask some questions and see what goes on. I think that's a cool way to do it, because then maybe you can get a conversation going too about this.
Yeah, and you know what? You could always like order your own, like get your own food, like even, and then just bring it to the family event and ask them to cook that.
Yeah.
Like, why not do that?
Cool. Yeah.
You don't have to. You don't have to be like a fitness Jesus, trying to convert everyone. But like, because that's kind of pointless. Because they'll change when they want to change. You can't change anyone at the end of the day. Long term, you can manipulate them for sure and cause short term change. But then the second you leave their life, they're going to be back to exactly where they wanted, where they were anyways. Maybe not where they want to be, but where they were regardless.
Yeah, I always think of it as like just kind of planting little seeds, like, because like my parents, like, they don't know anything about this stuff. So, just maybe like, oh, hey, I learned something, and, kind of sharing that with them, and maybe they won't get it, or maybe they'll be resistant to it at first, but, planting little seeds and just sending out little invitations to consider things and provoke some thoughts out there. Well, Eugene, this has been tremendous, man. I really appreciate you first reaching out to me and coming on and everything and sharing this stuff. I mean, it's just really tremendous. I'm going to get the book like now and watch the video too. It's super, super cool. What sometimes on the podcast, what I'll do is, like, when I'm ending it, I'll ask this kind of like real big picture question, and I'll say, like, if you were on, like, say, CNN and Fox News, you're on all the news channels for whatever reason, like you're the guy of the minutes, you got your 15 minutes of fame, you're on every channel. What would the one message that you would communicate? And obviously we touched on a lot of it on the podcast, but you're kind of like I don't know, elevator pitch or like soundbite kind of thing to communicate to people out there in the world about the things that you work and practice on.
Honestly, just live out your core values. If you don't know them, then start going out there and experimenting. And then when you do something you don't like, that's basically the universe telling you that you don't like it and you shouldn't do it anymore, and try something else.
Yes, that's perfect.
There's my quick
soundbite,
So, like, for instance, when you date someone and you don't like them, don't be mad about it. They just showed you that you shouldn't be dating that kind of person. So now you're closer to figuring out who you should be dating.
Yeah. I was listening to a Charles Eisenstein, who's an author I like a lot, podcast, I think, where he was talking about this woman. She was like, well, I'm afraid to confront my husband about something because I'm afraid that if I do, then he'll leave me. Right. So it's like staying in this kind of paradigm of fear that prevents us from moving, even if the movement that we need to have happen is going to be disruptive to our current kind of toxically comfortable situation. So he's like, eventually, below every fear, there's like a truth, and that truth wants to emerge, right? And so then when we keep that suppressed, all kinds of bad things can happen to us: stress, inflammation, depression, anxiety, all kinds of stuff. So he's like, eventually she did confront her husband about this thing, and he did leave her. And some people might say, oh my God, that's terrible. But you know what? It was good. It was the truth that needed to come forward and be born. And that truth comes from your core values and finding out what those are. So thank you for bringing that to attention, because it's super, super important.
Yep. No problem, Mike.
Man, okay, so tell people where they can find you. Obviously, we mentioned the books, and things like that. Where else can people go? Can they follow you places and subscribe anywhere, or websites or anything like that?
Yeah, they could just find me on my website, www.trufkinathletics.com, so trufkinathletics.com, or they can just type in my name in Google, and I'm sure they can find my Facebook and all that stuff there.
Well, Eugene, thank you so much. This has been such a illuminating, educational podcast. I really appreciate you making the time and sharing this wisdom. Folks, go out there, get this book. This is good. Eugene is shedding light on a way that we can navigate this toxic swamp that we find ourselves in, and find better things. So I'll have all the links in the show notes and everything. Thank you again, Eugene, for being on. Take care, everyone. Peace.
Cool. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. If you did, go and leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. You can leave a 5-star rating and a review if you feel like writing something. That would be great. It helps the show a lot, helps us bump us up in the Apple algorithm, get the podcast exposed to more people. So if you like the show, go ahead and do that. If you want to go a step further, go to patreon.com/MikeBrank. You can donate, become a patron, be a part of the Micadelic Inner Sanctum WhatsApp chat group of people chatting and connecting all around the world. We're finding the others, bringing them together, creating community. One of my favorite things to offer. I also release bonus episodes. Sometimes I do episodes that are kind of raw and kind of beta test them for the producers of the show, which are my patrons, the people who support the show. Big shout out to everybody that's a patron. Thank you for your love and support. If you want to do a one-time donation, go to my website, mikebrank.com. Go to PayPal and do a one-time donation if you feel that. And I really like the method of donation. It's a gifting mentality, and reading Charles Eisenstein's books recently and his talks have really kind of made me embrace the spirit of the gift, of giving and gifting. And what better time than this holiday season to be generous and to give. And, if you like the show, just tell people about it, spread it, share it. Also, contact me. Go to my email on my website, the contact page, mikebrank.com. Reach me on Instagram, Micadelic_podcast. Hit me up on Facebook. Send me your messages. Send me your thoughts. Send me guest suggestions, ideas. Share your story with me. Reach out. Give me feedback. What do you like? What don't you like? And I love to hear from people. I always respond. So you can go ahead and do that. If you're interested in CBD, we have Hemp Bombs as a sponsor. You can go to hempbombs.com, get all kinds of CBD stuff. And I used to take their gummies. I think I'm going to start taking them again. I ran out, so I got to get some more. But they're really good. And check it out. If you're interested in CBD, you want to give it a try, put in the code Mike15 at checkout and get 15% off all of your CBD wants, desires, needs, and so forth. Big shout out to Danny Barnett and Galaxia for the music, the intro and the outro. And of course, thanks to Muse, who I mash up their song and put the Terrence McKenna clips and everything in without their permission, but somehow I'm still able to do it. So thanks, because I love that. And what else? I don't know. Thank you so much to everybody for your love and support, for listening. And yeah, I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, really can't express how grateful I am that out of all the podcasts out there that you choose this one to listen to. And like I said, let's really make this a collaborative effort. If there's something that you hear, that you notice, something going on with the show that you're like, hey, you used to do this or you do that, or I'd like to see this, or hey, did you ever think about that? Shoot me a message. I'm open. I communicate. I message back. I like this to be a collaborative effort. I want more community involved in this. So anyway, thanks. And till next time, peace.